I'm Dan Wall. I'm 62 years old. In 1984, I was completing my first year as the superintendent of the Barneveld School District. I was a young administrator. I had 2 children, and I enjoyed the community immensely. 1 year into my tenure, it was time to renew the contract, and we sat up on a Thursday evening negotiating, as boards will and administrators will. We got hung up over what I recall was a difference of $500. I liked them, and I think they liked me well enough. I decided it wasn't worth hassling. We shook hands. I went home. An hour later, that room was destroyed by the Barneveld tornado, and that was the beginning of the saga, so to speak. When I think of images that stick in my mind, I think of the iconic water tower, simply because it became important to everybody in the community. I picture my own house. I picture where the shed was, where my dog lived and eventually was blown away like Dorothy. I think of my school, and I think of the front of the building and a skeleton, and I think of the struggle to rebuild it by September so we could start school on time. I think of the wreckage and the debris everywhere. I think of helicopters, and I think of, even though it's not an image, I think of heat and humidity and wetness for some reason. The day after the tornado was in the 90s, as I recall, it was oppressively humid, and it's an uncanny and uneasy parallel between Joplin, because the little I'm able to understand about that tragedy is they're now being plagued by rainstorms and weather, and you could ask anyone who was there in 1984. We just wondered when would it end, because that was a wet summer and there were many, many severe thunderstorms that followed. We never had another tornado, but we were so sensitized that it just felt like it would never end. In writing this story, I wrote it for myself, but as I used to tell my principals, it's okay to make yourself feel better if somebody else benefits too. And in the process, and also in talking with some survivors who went through this intense experience, it validated this feeling that I wasn't the only one who still had this hurt inside, this unresolved, nobody's listening to me kind of feeling. And I guess my hope was, if I've done a good job, that hopefully my fellow townspeople who were there will understand that we're a brotherhood, and we do feel each other's hurt, and we listen. As to the outside world, I guess the harshest thing that can happen to anybody is to have a hurt and feel like no one understands and no one listens. So the chainsaws and the checkbooks and the volunteer work are essential and life-saving, but sometimes you put down the checkbooks and the chainsaw and just listen.